Hello and welcome to another episode of Thinking Critically, a D&D discussion. My name is Danilo, a D&D miscreant, and I like all kinds of games and the crunchy mechanics that make them tick. The topic of today is mistakes. And I'm joined by Jamie Mitchell, one of my longest serving friends, now turned DM confidant. Thank you for joining me today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, as Dan says, long-term friends, and it was actually him that got me into Dungeons and Dragons in a weird way because we had a one-on-one campaign at the very beginning, but I really quickly realised the amount of scope that was in the game, and from there I basically went from having about 3 games with Dan to DMing my own campaign, so I didn't know what I was doing at all, and then since then I've just been running one-shots and DMing an overarching several campaigns. I ended up playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons very quickly because I was someone who could DM or would DM.
Yeah, same with me actually. It ramped up from, do I want to do this thing? Yeah, let's give it a shot. To, oh, that's every waking moment of my life now is consumed by D&D. Cool. I remember that first game because we were sitting downstairs in my kitchen and we'd got a couple of pints from the microbrewery nearby my house, and we were smashing those, and that quickly started with the best intentions, and then I think quickly
it devolved hideously. But then the kind of style of campaign, and honestly a lot of my style of play is always going to devolve hideously pretty quickly anyway.
My favourite anecdote from that is I think your first combat encounter was with 3 cats.
yeah, they kicked the shit out of me as well.
trying to balance a 1-player combat at level 1. Why do I even bother doing that? There you go. That's a good mistake. Anyway, so thanks for joining again. So, what do you think of when you hear the word mistakes within the D&D framework?
So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot there because it tends to be a game of happy accidents anyway, because it's a collaborative project, but it's a collaborative creative project. Other people's actions to you could quite easily look like mistakes, but it's all going to be the way those things interact with each other that creates the game anyway. So mistakes, initially, one of the things is that it's going to be a game of lots of different mistakes that end up, if you're doing it right, you surf that and it makes sense in a cohesive narrative, because life's lots of little accidents all over the place, and it's the way that you kind of interact with those that makes the thing. Also, though, there are just times when like today, when we were supposed to be recording this, and I got a text from a friend saying, "Can I DM today?" And I said, yeah, that's no problem, because I completely forgot we were supposed to be doing this. And then then had to immediately text them back saying, shit, no, sorry, wait a second. And so there are some mistakes. And one of the answers to them is apologise profusely and swear loads.
Which is, I think, a rule of thumb for life in general.
Yeah.
Can get you further than you think.
But it depends what you consider a mistake, doesn't it, within the game? Whether it's a DM's mistake, the player's mistake, are either going to know.
Yeah, I think what is made me super happy now is that I've come at this, my notes are very 2-dimensional and negative in that what's a player mistake, what constitutes a DM mistake. So it's good to have you being like, oh no, it's actually a good thing, and this is how we have a good time together. So perfect, that's check, bingo, podcast bingo, check, done, 1, great, I'm happy with. Why don't we start with player mistakes? It's a lower hanging fruit. So anyone who listens to the podcast and yourself will know that a particular bugbear of mine, pun intended, is that players not knowing the rules for their own characters. So like there's literally in the podcast just gone out, I've said there's an onus on players to meet the DM halfway with their understanding of the rules and at least know what the hell they're meant to be doing or what the hell they can do. But a mistake related to that players I see do, and I've done it myself in the past, is not understanding the spells or features. They might know what they are, but they don't know really what the impact is or what they can do.
It's where you get a good rules lawyer at your table.
Hello, that would be me. Yeah.
They just won't let that fly. And I think the more invested people get in the game, the more that stuff seems to even itself out. Because I mean, a lot of my times, my players will pick each other up on stuff. I'm quite lucky in that I don't tend don't tend to have to know exactly all of the ins and outs of each of the characters, because generally they're pretty good at saying, if they know that something is being misused or about to be misused and I haven't picked it up. But I mean, that's down to your table. I would say putting the onus on the players to know what they're doing so they don't just make ridiculous mistakes like repeatedly fireballing the party or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds dreamy, that situation that you're in. A lot of the time at the moment I'm having to double check and make sure prerequisites have been met, and is there an enemy adjacent to that ally, or are you already concentrating on something else is a classic one. So there's many times when I've not said no, I've done the yes but the but in that instance is so big that it may as well be a no.
Yeah.
So it's like, yes, you can cast that super powerful spell, but your other super powerful spell is going to drop. Well, then the answer is no. I don't want to waste 2 spell slots, maybe.
Yeah.
Or also things like, Hunger of Hadar, which I've had way back when someone's just blammed that in the middle of combat, and then all the frontline melee people are like,
could you not?
Yeah, I can't see anything now, so yeah, neither can the enemies, but...
I mean, the thing is, that is a mistake, absolutely. In one way, brilliant opportunity as a DM, though. Because you get to slaughter the party, and they're only going to do that kind of thing once.
Yes, yeah, it didn't help the players in that instance, let me put it like that. And a really quite egregious and recent example is a player used a Flaming Sphere, which is a 5-foot fire orb that has a 5-foot area of effect around it, and if anyone ends their turn within 5 foot, they take 2d6 fire damage. He brought that into existence pretty much on top of a fallen player, who obviously can't move out of the way, and so just immediately took 2d6 fire damage, therefore lost a death saving throw. And I didn't pull any punches on that. I just said, okay, he's within 5 foot, player character X, take your damage. And everyone was like, ugh! And just in a second, you could just see across the 6 players, like everybody's expressions are just like, oh shit, yeah, don't do that. Don't do that again.
Did you take it that because it was a declared action, then it was done and it was down?
Yeah, he summoned it, and when we got to the down player's turn, the caster hadn't moved it, so that's it, right?
Yeah,
He said he thought it was just within 5 foot of the sphere itself, but then that wasn't the first time it was cast, and we're quite experienced at this point. So my general rule is now, if you say it, it's done, and in that instance, it was.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think it depends on how much. Do you use visual aids quite a lot when you're playing?
Since moving to remotely, yeah, pretty much every combat encounter is on a virtual tabletop.
Right,
so
okay then.
If that's what you mean in terms of like visual aids, yes, pulling in random spells out of the 500 spells available to represent them on the pitch looks a bit weird sometimes. Maybe it just looks like a squiggly red line, but...
Yeah, no, this is what I mean though. If you've got a reasonable amount of a visual aid, and I think it's provided the players know what's going on. That's the important thing. If they're making mistakes when they are they're aware of the situation. If there's something like, I didn't realise that was there, then in that case, that's something that comes back on the person setting and narrating the scene. If it's just people taking their eye off the ball mid-combat and accidentally flaming a mate, then that's again a kind of mistake that your rogue and your barbarian are only going to let slide once, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I used to be a big proponent of theatre of the mind combat, but then literally as soon as they get to maybe like level 5 and the combat encounters themselves get a lot more complicated, half the combat is just the players going, yeah, but hang on, I've got one 20 foot away, I'm 30 foot away. Yeah, well, maybe it doesn't matter. Just hit someone, please. And moving to a VTT did basically remove all of that ambiguity. So again, like you said, the mistakes are pretty much only one way at that point.
Yeah, I think the theatre of the mind thing, it kind of opens it out massively for the DM, but it can make it quite hard for the players, especially as you say, as you get kind of later on. One way it is fantastic is if you just smash and grab D&D, where you just you just don't have the bits and pieces with you, but it means that you can just start playing pretty much wherever, and you don't have to have the setup. That's where that does massively boost. And it also does mean that you can kind of fudge mistakes a little easier.
Yes.
If you're being generous, or otherwise if your monsters are getting pasted. You can just slightly warp the map in your mind, and who's going to know?
Exactly.
It's like fudging dice rolls, isn't it? It is perfectly possible to. Oh, it's a lot more possible as a DM to do that with theatre of the mind than it is for you to just suddenly point out of the window and then shuffle things around on a map.
Yeah, like AoE effects and stuff. It's way easier to be like, oh, okay, no, you guys didn't know, but you were all standing in a 15-foot cone.
Yeah.
That's like a pretty bad example, but you know what I mean. His AoE of 40-foot radius can get you all. Oh, I didn't realise we were that close. Well, the enemies are only 30 foot apart, so it is a lot easier to kind of smooth over the cracks.
It's because a lot of it's quick and dirty maths, isn't it? When you're doing theatre of the mind, it is that quick and dirty maths to get the general idea over, because you're trying to keep things quick a lot of the time.
I did quite like the elegance almost in a way of, especially at like level 3, when it is more of a basic straight line combat of party A are hitting party B until one of them dies. It was quite simple of, okay, well, in my head, that knoll is going to hit that player, that knoll is going to hit that player, and that knoll is going to hit that player who's hitting back. Fine. It's quite nice, quite simple, quite easy. The other knolls are over there, the other players are over there in my head, and it's done. Whereas as soon as you bring it onto what is essentially a grid of rulers, then it's a lot more like, yeah, but how many foot? 23 foot?
It becomes a lot more tactical.
Foot,
It takes back on that kind of war game element, which you don't get so much as Theatre of the Mind. That's where, and it's also where you can fudge things with Rule of Cool a lot more in Theatre of the Mind, actually, in some ways. But you can get very, very tactical as soon as you go down to that map, and it's more unforgiving in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think I found myself being unforgiving, not just from the map, but also me as a DM, because things are so clear. That is a 5-foot radius. The flaming sphere, for example. I was like, okay, well, you've put it there. Like, maybe if we were in Theatre of the Mind, the benefit of the doubt would have just been like, okay, fine, it wasn't there, move on anyway. But because it was so blatantly obvious in front of me, I was like, well, I've got no recourse other than to say he's gonna fucking die.
This is what has happened. I'm assuming. So, did he carry on death saving? Did he sort himself out in the end? Did his party members heal him? Do party members heal each other?
Few and far between. They've only really got 2 out of 6, and only one of those is kind of specced in that direction. So he's often got his hands full with people doing weird and wacky shit like this. I think in that instance, he got healing worded, so jumped back up onto his feet. And yeah, needless to say, that probably won't happen again anytime soon.
Nope.
Another mistake I found of the players, and when I was writing these notes, it was kind of hard to draw a line between what would be constituted mistakes of the players and what would be constituted mistakes of the player characters. And one that would be good to get your thoughts on is one I wrote down. I won't tell you where, on what side I put it down, because I don't want to lead the witness, but it was a mistake of not preparing for adventure, and it's something that I've done quite frequently as a player, playing a player character, is, you know, all these guys are meant to be adventurers, relatively seasoned to a certain extent. Even at level 1, you kind of know what you're getting yourself in for.
You're slightly above the average.
Yeah. You're all implicitly there to be on an adventure. Even still, the amount of times parties have just left town without any health potions, or left town without actually taking a long rest, or other things like that, and they hit their first combat encounter and go, I really wish I had a suite of potions right now.
See, I tend not to have that problem so much, because I scare the hell out of my players a lot of the time. From level 1, they were scared shitless generally, because, I mean, part of that did, it's about back to a mistake where it was just my second session that I was playing. We were all imbibing quite a lot. It was a player who had missed the first session. So I'd had missed one on the first session. They came in on the second session. We all got drunk. And by the end of it, I'd done a bunch of plot expo, because I had no idea how long D&D was supposed to take at this stage, right? I'd had one really good intro in a tavern. That was from session 1. And then we were doing this thing. I got to the end of it, and I was like, well, shit, they've just zipped backwards and forwards across this supposedly deadly map incredibly easily. Just over the space of a few days, and nothing's happened to them. It was my first sense of travel at all in the game. And so I was like, so that thing that you saw the first time, you see 3 of them, basically, and it was a ghoul that they'd faced in a pub, which was quite a scary intro for 3 level 1s. 3 ghouls, for 4 level 1s is really deadly.
Yeah, for sure.
Colossal mistake. Didn't know what I was doing, but after it they started one-shotting people and it looked as intimidating. My players were quite nervous because it was like the DM's mad. He don't know what he's doing. He might kill us.
He has no fucking idea.
Literally 2 sessions later, I was like, don't worry, I've balanced this encounter. It's not going to one-shot you, when they were facing some other random thing and it one-shotted the druid straight away. And so I think sometimes mistakes can work quite nicely in your favour, because this means they constantly prepare all the time.
So what I'm hearing is that I need to punish my players more. Right, understood, if they're listening.
But randomly, like really, really randomly. Let them have like a few victories, make them feel badass, and all of a sudden then drop all hell on them. Following through on letting people make mistakes. Somebody put it, as forgive language, somebody put it, if your players fuck up, let them fuck up badly, basically. So one of my players made an error in judgment, potentially, or RP'd it really well, or deliberately made my life a nightmare. I don't think it was the last one, but I think that was an unintended side effect. But basically, they'd just done a boss fight, which had gone fairly well for them. And in this room was a secret another boss.
Okay.
Well, it could have been a boss, it could not have ended up in a fight. You know, I tend to play it that if players want to avoid fighting, they can try, at least.
Yeah.
So by the end of the first boss fight, their Hexblade was feeble-minded. The druid was on his last wild shape and was an eagle. The Ganassi rogue, I think, was jumping around on top of the boss. The second boss, the one that they hadn't activated at that point. And the ranger was fine. Well, had taken a few hit points, but was fine. They woke up the second boss, immediately started fighting it, which, I mean, it was an aboleth. It looked fucking scary.
Yeah.
There was reason to be afeared. That was it. There was also one NPC there and a bag of holding. The feeble-minded player was put into the bag of holding in order to transport them around.
Essentially, that was lovely.
Yeah, essentially the aboleth fight started and the Ganassi got enslaved. She was taken over. So essentially what you had is one PC that was currently available. But because his party member had just dropped into the water with it, the aboleth, he dived in and went for it to try and solo it, essentially.
1v1 me, scrub.
Exactly. Like, he was trying to get... This is level 8 or something like that? I can't remember.
Right, yeah. Good luck.
Yeah. And so he was trying to get the other party member back out of the water, but she was mind controlled, so she was fighting him. He went toe-to-toe with the aboleth, got taken out on the first hit, and at this stage, you're in the water, everything's up Aboleth Creek with no kind of paddle. What do you do? I could have said the aboleth hits him once and then climbs out of the water and does something else, but at the same time, this thing was pretty angry, so it just unloaded on him. At that point, the eagle flew off with the other NPC and the feeble-minded person in a bag, and I had a 3-way split party with one of those ways being dead. Now, was that a mistake on the player's part, or would his character have blindly charged in heroically in order to try and do that thing? Probably. Is it lawful good or is it lawful stupid? Don't know, but it's an awesome story, isn't it? Because what happened then was eventually there was reincarnation and a character arc coming back, and the way the party treated him didn't disrespect him for what he did, but at the same time there was that was really brave but really stupid. Please don't ever try and rescue me like that again.
It's cute that your guys want to rescue each other. Mine would sooner sacrifice each other. So
for the greater good?
For someone's good.
Is that for someone's good or for someone's gold?
Well, a little bit column A, a little bit column B.
So often it is.
I was going to say, it's a good segue. Actually, before we do that, the one last comment I had, and again, this is what I like is that in your last description there, we couldn't work out whether it was a player or a player character thing, and that's good because it means that they're kind of reaching the synergy, and the Venn diagrams, the two circles are overlapping, which is great. But another problem I've had myself is when I think about playing a character and I think about needing a mechanical rest in the game, I always try and be good and not just rest after every fight. Like, oh, I've taken a bit of damage, fuck it, sit down for an hour. Oh, I've taken 2 bits of damage, right, bedroll comes out 8 hours later, so on and so on. I think that for me personally, it's easy to overdo that too much and just, but no, I don't need to. I'll push the limit. I'll push the boundaries. I don't need to rest. I don't need to rest. I don't need to rest. Just to almost it's starting to stretch the player character divide there, as actually Danilo trying to bite off more than he can chew and trying to be subversive just for the sake of being subversive. Yeah, just coming up against a boss running on fumes and being like, shit, should have rested.
See, like, the only thing that I'm playing as at the moment is an elderly wizard, so he wants to rest a lot. Yeah, no, he doesn't want to go very far without sitting down for a little bit. Because he can't walk that far, gnomish. But that I haven't come up against personally. My party, again, when I'm DM, they want to rest a lot. The thing that I've struggled with actually there more, because I've DM'd a lot more than I've played. The thing I struggle there is poking them and making them, not giving them that opportunity.
Yeah, which is something I was going to ask your opinion on something soon, but I'll save that for off the record. But I think players are very much drawn to it because there doesn't seem to be a cost. Like casting a spell, there's a cost. There's a spell slot. Okay, fine. Buying a potion, there's a cost. It's gold. Fine. Making an attack, there's a cost. It's your action. The price you pay to hit somebody is your action. Yep. Taking a rest, rules is written in the book from a player's perspective. It's just sit down and heal. Well, that's like 200 golds worth of healing potions for free.
Your hit dice expenditure.
True, yep, there is that. But for a long rest, you don't. In fact, you get your hit dice back, half your hit dice back for a long rest, and fully healed, rules is written.
I think there's the thing you've got to... One thing there, actually, is timekeeping. Because it's that having that narrative backing to go like, I mean, you've been up for 2 hours. No, you're probably not going to go back to sleep again.
You can't just go straight to sleep again, yeah. That's something I do take a guilty pleasure. Actually, it's not guilty. I relish in taking the pleasure of being like, guys, you woke up 2 hours ago. Not one of you is ready to go to sleep for 8 hours. How weak are you?
But I think, again, it's remembering to use hit dice is a big thing, and that making sure that players know that there's the option of taking that hour of just sitting down and doing something. How much do you let people do in that hour? Is there...
Well, like a short rest?
Yeah.
Well, as much as they want. I usually give people the opportunity to say, you've got an hour now, relatively quiet. If they're getting the hour for free, then do you want to talk about things? What do you do? They usually set traps or keep watch maybe, but other than that, nothing that I would consider strenuous.
Yeah. Part of the thing that's good to do there is just make sure those little natural breaks are woven into the story. I'm playing Strahd at the moment, and we're travelling. And to be honest, I mean, Strahd's supposed to be scary as hell anyway, and that kind of bleak, weary feeling to it. So when we're travelling there, if we do get in a fight, then we do try and take an hour afterwards, because we literally don't know where the next friendly territory is. I mean, out of character, I know full well there isn't any. Not near you. Yeah, so the short rest mechanic and the rest mechanics, I have found them being a problem, but more with the 8 hours one. And the thing is there, you can only have that 8 hours rest per 24-hour period per day. So there's that limitation on it. It's reminding people that is a limitation there. And you could add penalizations to it, because it's difficult, especially because you don't, sleep isn't that clearly defined in Raw.
No.
Comparative to just resting for 8 hours. Like their relationship isn't really kind of tucked in. So some of the language around it is a little bit loose, which I think is part of the problem there as well. So not our mistake, it's Mel's and Crawford's.
Yeah. No, it is, and it is. Yeah, leads to those. Well, let me just sit down for 8 hours. But one of the things I put in my campaign primer, my cheat sheet for the setting, is just because you slack off for 2 days doesn't mean the universe is slacking off for 2 days. So if you sod around and go and have a party for a week, because that's what the characters want to do, I was like, yeah, it's fine, and we can do that, and I'd love to make some crazy party mansion up for you guys. But there's still some existential threat that is not in a party mansion for a week.
I mean, yeah, I have had people wanting to pause and take rest when it's not been appropriate. This is when, like, yeah, no, I've had them trying to literally long rest in the belly of the beast, so to speak, right at the top of a hive full of chill run over by a mad Bulithari.
Yeah.
But basically, there, you had one or two players saying, can we rest? I could really do with the rest. And then you just had the others going, no, we can't, because we will die. And again, just maintaining that level of terror. Just
Jamie's DM tip of the day.
keep your players stressed.
No one should be happy. Everyone should be scared.
It works. It means that when they do go shopping, they really enjoy shopping. That becomes a lot more stressful for you as a DM, though.
Yeah. Perhaps, every time I allow a flame sphere to give a death save, I go, ooh, maybe I'm too harsh. But then, thank you for being my
a moral compass.
Yeah. Excellent. You just unlocked a door of pain for my players.
But I mean, again, something like that, it's about the effect, though. So you just start ramping up noises in the dark. You can chivvy players along. There doesn't actually have to be anything there.
Yeah.
Smoke and mirrors, provided you're not properly battle mapping it out and they've calculated how many specifically are in each corridor and whatnot.
Yes. Yeah.
Which means they're not using primeval awareness, or because that's where you've got to be quite hard. It's when there's something like that. The UA version of primeval awareness, I think, is the most OP.
Well, this was like detect good and evil, and
it's specific numbers and distance of your favoured enemy. If you choose humanoid, then that can get a little irritating if they're pinging.
How many bandits are in the next room?
Exactly.
Tell me.
Well, the thing there is it doesn't tell you about the imps that they've got waiting above the door, and it doesn't tell you about the wolves that they've got. So again, you'd try and teach people not to rely on that intel too much.
Yeah.
But you can also, if it's something like humanoids, you can tend to just say, oh, like, there's people all around you. You can't see very much.
Yeah. Noise, blinded by the noise.
Exactly,
in a way.
yeah.
Yeah, which is what I use for kind of detect magic and stuff. I say, well, yeah, but there's 5 people you're travelling with that are just fucking beacons of arcane energy, and it gets a little bit hard to pinpoint a mote of energy 4 rooms away, because you've got a sorcerer next to you that's just like, boo!
Sorry.
What? Why are you looking at me funny? Because you look like you're about to fucking explode. So we've talked about kind of player mistakes, or maybe not mistakes, maybe just misunderstandings that might lead to jumping boards, springboards for other avenues of adventure. Let's get into the juicy bits that we're probably more familiar with than we both like to admit, of Dungeon Master mistakes. And one thing you mentioned earlier on was the encounters, the ghoul encounter of just like one hit knockout of one of the players. And I think making encounters fun is something that is A, insanely difficult to do well and routinely, and B, therefore very easy to make a mistake on.
You mean actually setting up the encounter, so like calculating challenge rating and all that kind of stuff, do you mean?
Yeah, just without experience, I tried to make encounters medium or easy for a bunch of new players, which turned out over the time and over other things I've read and whatnot, is that basically everyone says easy, don't even bother because they're just worthless. Even if you have 10 easy encounters, the players will probably just cakewalk all of them. Medium is essentially easy, hard is essentially medium based on the rules as written. So there were some mistakes I made there in making encounters that were probably one level lower than they should have been. Or if I'm having like 4 or 5, then a couple of those might be medium, technically, as rules as written, and then there'll be a couple of hard ones thrown in. But just trying to balance it so that it's fun, and I know that cakewalking can be fun.
Yeah.
It has its place.
I think the thing is, by the time they come to the point where add more mooks is always the answer, isn't it, with an encounter, to bump up that.
The scaling is just so bonkers, especially if you're at 3 players or 6 players, when you get into the modifiers of times it by 0.5 or times it by 1.5, that it just swings. Like adding 1 mook can take something from low end of medium to the middle end of hard just by adding 1 more mook, just because it pushes the multiplication into the next boundary. And as a new DM, looking at that, being like, what the is this going to kill my players, or is this not even going to...
Yeah, the thing that... I don't know if this was the second one-shotting, or, I don't know, one of the one-shotting, but one of the times that I put some random creature, it was a shadow.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
At night, in the woods, when they'd settled down, so basically it had freedom to be invisible around them,
Yep.
and then would just wander in and murk people. They were level 2 at this point, I think. Oh, yeah. Maybe 3.
That's really spicy.
So 2 is, I think, the right CR, technically.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's correct.
Let's bring that up.
Yeah.
A single shadow is challenge rating half, but the problem with that is the stealth drain and basically being invisible.
Yep.
Is insane.
Yeah.
So yeah, one or 2 solid hits and it will go down. Oh, no, that's a lie, because they're also resistant to non-magical damage.
Yes, they are, which at a half challenge rating is horrific for a player. And if you hadn't just given them magical weapons off the bat, even your wizard's going to be struggling to maintain something on that for any period of time.
Yeah, I've used shadows before where they did that hit and run of bonus action hide, attack, bonus action hide, attack. So it's like, oh, we just can't hit this thing, or there's maybe a brief window where you can. And then it's basically down to the wizard to really send it home. But for a half challenge rating, yeah, for a newbie DM, putting that up and being like, oh, that's an easy encounter, fine. Oh, two players are dead because they don't have any strength anymore.
Yep.
Whoops.
Permadead as well. Yeah. So that was an interesting mistake. But then I can't remember how that finally played out. But this is the thing about having quite loose hit point maximums and minimums for your monster, and working that in narratively as well. So, for example, if those 2 orcs didn't have the same hit points, no, because they were 2 different orcs. That one's 30 years younger than that one. Do you know what I mean? There's that.
Yeah.
As a DM, you've kind of got to have the ability to just narrative away those mistakes. And provided you've got player buy-in, then people will let you do it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
The things that you can just kind of push through with. What I like is when players point out mistakes that you hadn't realised were there, but problems that are there that you hadn't realised. I find players can actually fill in gaps really nicely if provided you push the right buttons and make them invested and nervous about a situation in the right way, then they'll actually cover your back, or can actually cover your back quite a lot. And that's even with the relatively Gygaxian seeming way that I play, which sounds like I'm constantly being really nasty to them. It's not. It's just provided that they think there is a very high chance of something going wrong. And then because there's that buy-in, they talk about it. I mean, this could be just my table because I've got the same group of people that I play with a lot, and so we know how each other play quite well.
There was a post on Reddit recently that was criticising basically all the published modules for being, basically a bit crap, in that they like TPK machines and they rush players through levels because they're all designed to start at level 1 and finish at a decent enough level 10. So in the space of 1 book, you're taking players from 1 to 10, and his comments were saying that it rushes through them, and sometimes you'll get level ups at arbitrary points just for walking down a set of stairs. Ding, you're now level 4, and that because of that, combined with some of the encounters, they're like TPK machines, and it just assumes the books are implicit in that the DM should be saving the players. If you ran it as it's written, like a breath weapon, for example, with just 1 failed save, can just knock down the entire party. But a counterpoint that someone else commented, which is pretty much what you've just explained, is that for Curse of Strahd, for an example, all the low-level stuff is there to set that precedent of this oppressive atmosphere. So like the players, are meant to be TPK susceptible if they make mistakes, if they make stupid decisions, because it's this oppressive world where you can just die. And
That may well be where we've ended up last session. I've been polymorphed into a snail and are being carried off by something, while the rest of the party is not doing too well downstairs. I don't
a
think.
snail.
Yeah.
Wow. At least it's not a slug.
Yeah, it
'cause
could be worse, I suppose.
could be worse. So I really liked that. You know, yes, they're probably TPK machines, and yes, they could probably do a bit of a better job at communicating certain things. And yeah, it's probably a crutch having to start at level 1. This probably restricts the design of adventures. It's a bit of a shame, like, if you think about what adventures there could be if the books, like, these players start at level 10, but they don't make as much money because players want to start at level 1 sometimes, and newbies and whatnot.
And also, they were kind of running it through a few times, weren't they? And I don't know, because I've never played a published module. So this is the thing about the mistakes and DMing. First thing, I'd played twice with you, and then started DMing a campaign. I had no idea on scaling. You're saying that the books rush people through. That sounds like dreamy to me, because it's 3 years on nearly from when I started the campaign. I thought it was done in 6 months. I thought that was it. I was expecting them to go from 1 to 20 in 6 months, job done, that's it, game over.
Everybody wins.
As it was, like, it took them a month or so to convince them to go on the damn quest, I think, from what I remember at the beginning, because of that wanting to buy in and have that reality to, is this the right thing to do? The weight of that. So yeah, I mean, my first mistake was definitely massively underestimating the scale of what we were getting, what I was getting myself into with this. And don't get me wrong, I'm glad, because the amount of skimming that would have to have been done to get this stuff over and done within 6 months would be shocking. It's the amount of growth that there's been, even within the characters and plot that's unfolded, that I wouldn't have seen there. It's when you put an NPC in and people interact with it. Now, a lot of the time, there are a lot of NPCs there that are just not very interesting people, as is the nature of the world. What happens if you accidentally put a funky little thing in there by mistake, almost, because you're just filling in the background? Like the little mushroom man in the cage, which is now a major plot point in my campaign. It was kind of a mistake to put it in there. It was an accidental thing that I chucked in, but one of the players really attached to it, and there was just ways that could unfold out. And now it looks built in and whole baked into the world. Wasn't at the start, and I did, as soon as he went and started talking to it and bought it off the bloke, I went, oh shit, that was a mistake, wasn't it? Turns out 2 years later, when he's become a prince of some mycelial colony, no, it's not.
What's nice and reassuring is that although so far we've made it sound like yours is some oppressive hellscape where everybody wants to kill themselves because it's so horrible, and mine is some fairyland of, oopsie, I've hurt my friend, but that's okay, don't worry, move along. In reality, they're actually two sides of the same coin and suffer from the same mistakes on our parts. And so very similar, like what I would consider the prologue to my campaign was probably about 4 months in of itself. just the, like, this is what a piece of combat looks like, and this is what some social interactions look like, and here's a tiny little, like, a 3-room dungeon that was linear apart from a trap, but that in itself took forever. And I had to keep saying, like, the game hasn't actually started yet, guys. You're still just in the prologue. But can we level up yet? I can't really, because then the prologue is going to be too easy. So
I think this is where I set up the scenario at the beginning, roughly what my end-game scenario is. And this is what I did. I wrote an entire kind of, like, a place and a storyline of roughly what happened there. It was bouncing off of a druid backstory. I made, like, one town and, like, a few people, or sorry, 2 towns, I think. I don't know, some small amount. And I suddenly realised I had this bloody great big map and nothing to go on it. So at that point, because they'd already started travelling across the map, this is about session, so early doors, probably about 4 when they'd actually started properly trekking. And that filling in of it and basically winging it has allowed for really nice organic development with buy-in, and that, like, this guy on Great GM on YouTube mentions letting players give you your ideas is brilliant, because it gives them that feeling of buy-in, and if they kind of thought something was coming, do you know what I mean? You take what they suggest, but I mean, you blow it all out of proportion, completely twist it, and then stab them with it a couple of times. But still, that buy-in from that, allowing players to fill in bits. You follow me?
Yeah, I get it. But what is disappointing to me is I am way too prideful or proud to let that happen. No, it's more a case of like, this is a this is a character flaw of Danilo, in that if someone thinks of something clever, I'm more like, you fucker, why are you cleverer than me? And I don't want to give them that. which is on me. That's a human thing.
No, but it's a wonderful chance to prove just how much cleverer than you are than them. If they create an idea, and then that idea they didn't see coming in that particular way.
Mm-hmm.
How rigidly would you say your scenarios are prepped prior to going in?
Sessions or scenarios? Arcs or singular sessions?
That's a good question. Singular sessions.
So that depends. What I found oddly is that the dungeon part of D&D's is actually a piece of piss, because that's quite easy to set it up all at once, and then that's like 5 to 10 sessions worth of content.
Yeah.
If I've got a dungeon ready, which is great, because then I have, as I was saying earlier, like, I've got very little prep to do in between sessions because the dungeon's there. It takes a bit of time, but it's relatively easy to throw it down, throw a few combat encounters in a few rooms, make sure there's traps and so on and yada yada yada. It fits narratively, and then it's done. So that's quite easy. But then it's the bits in between when they are thinking about going somewhere,
the freeform,
thinking about doing something. Then my session prep becomes a lot more. How rigid am I? Yes, it's a collaborative story, and yes, the players are the authors. And yes, I do want to run at some point a completely improvised couple of shots of literally just going in completely blank, of just the characters and the races are randomized at the start. Everybody gets a random combination of a character and a race, and the DM is completely.
I was
bonkers.
so keen on that idea right up until the one time that I rolled my stats, and then I was like, nah, standard array is amazing. Standard array point by.
Yeah, I mean, the stats I might. I don't know, in for a penny and for a pound, so I might have to randomise them as well. And then, the DM is just like, okay, you are prisoners on a spaceship, and you just go from there, like completely random. So
I mean, that does sound like my campaigns, I think my players might say.
So I do like that, and do know that's a thing, and the players are the authors. However, I think for it to be a compelling story with any length of weight, there does need to be some kind of framework, some kind of scaffolding. So there does need to be like some level of linearity, which I know everybody hates, but then I've seen comments of people being like, no, that's not a garbage game you make up on the spot. Just because it's not on rails doesn't make it inherently good. It's still garbage. So in some ways, I think a well-developed framework or scaffolding that has doors you can open along the way, maybe like that scene in The Matrix where they're in that tunnel to get the key maker or whatever, and there's loads of doors down it and you can open it and it goes into some kind of crazy world.
Yeah.
Neo was still trying to get from one end of that corridor to the other. I think that's quite a good metaphor of perhaps how I do it.
Yeah, so I mean, this by nature it's episodic, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because you've only got 4 hours to play a week on, and even that's an episode, isn't it?
Yes.
So there's for me, I had a story, and that story, this is my beginning story. They're stuck in an island. So this was the first thing I was like, trap them, because I saw a pitfall coming already. Oh, what if your players don't want to join a party and go and do the thing that you want them to do? So I was like, no, fine, trap and make them. Necessity is the
mother of invention.
Yeah, and really helpful as a DM. Make your players need the thing that you want them to do. But my plan was they're stuck in a place and they have to beat 3 bosses in order to leave. Now, I should say the players know this by this stage, but the last boss is a solar, so this gives you an idea of how not with it I was in terms of my scaling.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, yeah, you've got those, beat those 3 bosses, and then we do whatever. Then there's either another campaign after it or whatnot. But that level of kind of looseness, and that was on a map, and I suddenly realised that to get between these things, if I'd bigged this place up as being dangerous, then there was going to have to be a lot of fill-in done in there. And so I think that's where the player-led thing came from, just out of necessity. And I've got things that I drop in their way as they go along, but then how people react to those things, I think really drives that game. Because the thing that drew it to me when we started playing was how sandbox it was. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
And just even getting out of jail cell at the beginning was a bloody nightmare from what I remember. But still, that level of what do you want to do within this world that's coherent and makes sense?
Yes, yeah.
I mean, I can explain a lot of my mistakes away as happy accidents like I did at the start of the session.
Yeah, nice opening caveat there.
That's right.
It's not my fault. And it turns out great.
No, it is my fault. This is the point. Like, it's totally my fault when it works out awesomely. It's because I'm a laid-back DM, not because I'm just frantically winging it.
Yeah, I'm a chill, cool dude, guys. Just do what you want. Everything goes.
Hey, fellow PCs.
Likewise, I enjoyed, and this is a point in my notes, actually, of a mistake that I continue to make, but is it a mistake? Probably not, because I enjoy doing it, is over-planning the long term and neglecting the micro. So I enjoy doing the macro of, and I don't mean macro of like, there's this religion and there's these political fights, and that's not too galvanizing for me. What I more like thinking is, ooh, that character said that in their backstory. Wouldn't that be cool if this tied in some way and this other thing tied in some way, and maybe in a year they bump into this other person and, oh, it's a big reveal, is that they were adopted or something weird. That is enjoyable. So I'll spend like 2 hours doing that and then go, yeah, but how many kobolds are they going to fight tomorrow down like
No, I know exactly what you mean, man. I think this is something that I suffer from massively as well, and that is the narrative side of it. I know it didn't seem very much like it from the way I've described my campaign, but my God, you should read the backstories of those 3 bosses. They were absolutely fantastic. Didn't matter that actually they weren't be able to face any of those bosses for a number of levels yet, and I had to find something to do with them between being born and fighting a necromancer. There has to be some fill in there to get to that. How do you do that? So yeah, no, I totally agree and see the issue with that. What it is, and you've hit a important distinction, quite an important distinction, which is between world building, which is the religion, and the which is a mistake that you can easily make as a DM. You can, if you don't want to give your players literally 2 pages worth of world building narrative about the local religion, either as pages because they won't read them, they'll lose them, their dog will eat them, or they'll lie and say their dog's eaten them. And you don't want to give them that in DM exposition, because either of those will lose you your players.
Yeah.
You might be able to have that stuff, but that's for you. And if you've got that stuff and you know it, then drip feed it to your players if you can, if it comes up. But do bear in mind that, like, very few people have read every book in Skyrim, right?
Yes.
There is people that have, and you can get that information because I've looked it up once. But generally, you can, if you're focusing on that world building side, there might well be a lot there that your players are just never going to see. Likewise, in terms of narrative, weaving a lot into the narrative and tying all these things in together, again, could be really, really useful for you as a DM, and depending on how much you do it, you might be able to do that. But I think there could be a stumbling block if you're trying to fit that stuff in. Do you know what I mean? About, like, if you're trying to overstuff it, you've got to be willing to let any bits of these pieces of work you do behind the scenes go to a greater or lesser extent, depending on how the player interacts with the world. Yeah. For me, that background story, though, is a massive part of it. And, like, I love narrative. I love story.
Yeah.
And so the way that I approach a campaign, I think, is very similar to that. It's how do all of these things fit together? The problem is I end up making it way, 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 way too big. And so, like, I've got stuff that fits into this campaign that's really cool now that it's like a campaign's time away.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, I've got so much flow charts and if this then that and all sorts of bits and bobs where the likelihood of them getting there anytime soon and being in any kind of state to appreciate it is, and you know what, that's an anxiety point for me is obviously I've tied things into backstories which will just be completely wasted if that character dies, which is a real possibility. So it's going to be quite underwhelming when say that character dies, the rest of the party get there, and I'm like, oh, here's something that none of you know or recognize. Oh,
What's your take on resurrection magic?
So one thing that I read recently about, and I want to try and adopt, but I don't know how much taking the piss this is if I adopt it mid-campaign, of not just resurrections, but also like revivify, basically once they've died or even gone to 0 HP, when they come back, they should have some kind of shortcoming. So they should be having a level of exhaustion for a really basic implementation of that. But you could have stuff like half movement speed, or because their legs are fucked, or disadvantage on perception
permanently,
checks
or just...
Yeah, I think that was one of the if they die, then yeah, if they get revived, they should have some kind of permanent debuff. That, you know, outside of wish or greater restoration, yeah, maybe they will get rid of it. But because it's just a bit fourth wall breaking to say that person's been mangled and mauled, and I know HP isn't health, it's fighting effectiveness or whatever, and they might be fit and healthy, they're just knackered on the floor. I get it, but 3 death saves they're fucked. Right, there's no ifs or buts or maybes. They're gone, and if for someone to just slam a revivify on them and then kill wounds, then they're back up to 30 HP and taking down Tarrasques is a bit like it doesn't really. I know magic is a thing, and yes, they can get healed, but I still feel like there needs to be another layer of something in there to say like you fucking died, man. Like properly dead. Like your soul wasn't in your body anymore. It's gone. Like you're lucky to have a body to go back to.
So, what sort of level would you get Revivify? Because I never play.
My guys have got it at level 8. I think they might have had it maybe at level 7. The cleric has, but the bigger barrier to entry, potentially, depending on the campaign, is a 50G. No, maybe it's even a 200 gold diamond.
Diamond, yeah.
That gets consumed, which don't come on, floating on trees, and that's something my players have said, like, we need to be careful because we don't have any more diamonds because, download doesn't give us any treasure. And I said, yeah, but the places you've been are a peasant farming settlement, which, surprise, surprise, doesn't have thousands worth of gold knocking around because then it wouldn't be a peasant farming settlement. And, an abandoned horror church full of undead people that, again, surprise, surprise, had some magic items in it, but not hordes of diamonds, because why would there be? And then, they did go down to a mine once where they did find a couple of diamonds, which they've since had to use. Yeah. So I think that's a bigger barrier for my players is having the diamonds.
It's one mistake that your players are making is not robbing the right people. Must rob richer graves.
They do tend to antagonise poor people and people that have no stake in the game. People.
It's Bojo Simulator.
Sorry. So resurrection can happen, and it has happened in my campaign. One character was dead, fully dead, and luckily for him, it came at Christmas time, so he tied it into a Christmas-themed special where they went into his psyche and had to cure him from the inside out with the help of an NPC priest, and all the NPCs in his psyche were called. Well, looked like him. It was like a Being John Malkovich situation, and they all had variations of his name. But it was all Christmas themed. They fought like a snowman, and yeah, and that was quite good. And they killed all these bosses. They killed the disease that was killing him at the end, which was like a manifest. Like the helmet fell off, and it was his face underneath. Oh God, he's his own. Right, he's his own disease. But
yeah. So just specifically on the kind of hampering them, I think because I managed to kill at least one of my guys before they reached a level where they could get revivified. They don't have a cleric in their party anyway, actually, but they were using resurrection, and that comes with its wonderful own set of dangers. So I've had a player death twice.
Yeah, because there's resurrection, and then I think there's true resurrection, isn't there?
Yeah, no, sorry, I don't even mean resurrection. I mean reincarnation. Sorry.
Yes, I think that's it. That's the three, isn't it? Reincarnation, resurrect, and then true resurrection.
Yep.
I think are the three.
Yep, and you've got because their healer's a druid, so he's got reincarnation a lot earlier than he's got anything else. I also gave him a couple of scrolls of reincarnation as well, just because I'm scaring them, but I'm also quite nice, really. But that comes with its own massive hampering. So my guys are pretty scared of death off the bat because they had to roll for one of their players to come back. Luckily, it was the most ridiculous roll ever because he came back as the same thing that he was. So he should have been hampered. Like there was that big risk that his stats were just going to go out, and he came back as a wood elf again. So I just slightly changed his appearance, some vague way. I can't remember how. But the next time that happened, the player came back as a dragonborn, and it was not a good build for them, and so there was that level of stress there. And also, it wasn't just a case of okay, then the soul comes back into the body. It was like a kind of seance thing where they're all sitting around having to actually do a thing together, and then also
yes, there's a rigmarole to it.
Well, they had an encounter. That was it. They had a combat encounter because they had to go and physically get the soul back.
Yes,
and that took like an entire session of them traveling through the astral plane and just like even like that was just a little puzzle at the beginning of the session where you've got the single player on one side and you've got the others on the other and how they get to each other and all that kind of thing. So provided you've used it as a scope for making a bigger storyline, I think you've yeah, and
that's as I said, we had that one, and then a player earlier on in the campaign got petrified when they were like level 4 or 5 or something. So again, there's no by basilisks. There's like no way of getting out that for a good 10 levels or something absurd. So again, they had it was all improvised on the fly, and it was a whole thing of okay, well, each player asked to contribute somehow. So any that had deities were praying and giving them a call on the old beeper, and they rang up a powerful wizard they knew on the speaking stone to be like, hey, can you help us from a distance at all? Well, like, let me send some good vibes and see what I can do remotely, like remote technical assistance to cure this petrification. And everybody tried to do something, even those that were kind of like atheists or didn't know anything about religion were helping the others in some way. So a couple of roles involved, and long story short is I think he took 2 or 3 levels of exhaustion at the cost of me improvising something they shouldn't have access to for another 5 levels or whatnot. Which done him over for a time, but that was quite good on the spot and was good role play because everybody was like, oh yeah, let me speak to a god, or let me think, let me look through my toolkit of stuff that we're now so far out of rules of written, I'm forced to think outside the box and forced to be like, fuck, I've got oil, maybe if I draw a symbol of a god on him in oil, maybe that will help, and just weird and wacky stuff. So that was quite good. So maybe a case of like revivify, although it has a cost, it's the lowest cost, and going down to 0, no. And then, just if they get stabilised when they're making saving throws, no, probably Cure Wounds is within the intent of, they got a bit fucked, but Cure Wounds has resolved that fuckedness so they can start swinging a sword again. Yeah, I get it. But dying, maybe there needs to be, if someone just has the spell and they can just cast it, then maybe I might introduce a semi-permanent problem there as the alternative of having to spend a session trying to impeach
rustle up diamonds
and speak to every god under the sun to get them to help. That's the trade-off there is you can do it automatically now. If your car breaks down, you can just go and buy a new car, but like it's
there's got to be some kind of change. Well and again, this is where I think there are ways to I haven't had to do it necessarily because my players are quite dramatic, but there are ways of impressing on people even without a kind of any mechanical negative other than massive levels of exhaustion, but the psychological damage that is done on something that has been done to them. You can give them, even if you don't take the entire party to the afterlife to go and get them back, which is generally going to be my favoured way of doing it. You can still inject. You get these near-death experiences, right? People talk about near-death experiences and things like that. Not necessarily always going to be nice ones. So that introducing that level of the player becoming aware of their own mortality, despite the fact that they just came back. Always more consequences, isn't it, man?
So I think overall we've actually had in total 3 deaths, one of which was revivified, 2 of which were ham-fisted improvised ways of, because they were a bit lower level and so on and so on. But now the gloves are
Revivify and what, sorry?
So one was just a legit use of revivify.
Yeah.
Just like I cast a spell, they're not dead anymore. Cushy. Because that's like a combat res.
Yeah.
Revivify is a combat res. And then the other 2 were the imploring the gods and then the Christmas special. So
I love the Christmas special, man. That's wicked.
yeah, and I got of course, because that player was dead, I got him he was like my assistant DM, so he played the NPCs because they were kind of artifacts of his personality anyway, so it worked out quite well. I just gave him some guidelines and some notes ahead of time as to what to say and what to not say, and then just let them kind of still play. It was kind of weird, but kind of cool. And it was a goofy Christmas special to bring him back to life. But both his body and the other guy who died's body, their bodies are permanently disfigured in some way due to the nature of how they died. But yeah, just looking at reincarnate now, with all the different ways you can come back. We do have a druid in the party, so I'll be looking forward to seeing if he can do that. But resurrection 7th level is pretty darn high with 1,000 gold diamond. Okay, so there's no... I know. Okay, there it is. There it is. Coming back from the dead is an ordeal. The target takes a -4 penalty. It's basically like exhaustion. They have to do a long rest.
Yeah.
So they have to do a long rest, and then it goes to -3, and then it goes to -2 per long rest. So that is actually already baked into that spell. So I don't think it's a huge notion.
This is the thing. Provided you're really, really hammering home how difficult it is to die and then come back to life. I also found it funny that you gave your guys a Christmas special. I skinned mine with the Chain Devil. that was where they found the ranger the second time he died. Dang.
2 sides of the same coin.
Yeah, no, I know, right? You guys are battling Frosty the Snowman. My guy's screaming in a Takashi Miike film.
And then I looked at True Resurrection as well, which is a 9th level spell, which obviously is a big deal in of itself, but also needs diamonds worth 25k gold, which is a lot. But maybe at 9th level they've got a buttload of money, so maybe it's not a big deal. But
I mean, one of the campaigns I'm running, I've got a city where you can go to the local hospital and buy Reincarnation True Resurrection. But there's a markup on it. It's like 50k or something like that.
Right,
35k maybe, so I can't remember. But you can do it, so there's really no worry there. Except, of course, unless you don't have the body or something like that. And even then, there's ways around that. So what's the point in killing people? Well, the point is it's still really unpleasant to be killed. It's still a really dominating thing to be able to just assassinate someone. It's the ultimate putting a bullying and putting somebody in their place within that setting. So even then, in a game where I've completely gone, dying really almost doesn't matter at this stage. There's other ways of upping those stakes. And even when death is not an option, because you can sort it out down the local clinic, there's still good reasons not to die. Aside from anything else, you're losing time.
Yes, exactly. And I didn't see there on Resurrection as well that it's only available to clerics and bards, curiously enough, who don't have access to reincarnate or True Resurrection. So bards just sit in the middle with, like, I could do a bit of reviving there, which actually kind of makes narrative sense. I can kind of get behind that. Can you revive me? Yeah!
Kind of. Bit.
But also the person that casts it can't cast spells until... if you're trying to revive someone who's been dead longer than a year, they can't cast spells until they have a long rest and have also disadvantage on... They have a level of exhaustion and can't cast spells until they have a long rest. There's like 2. The caster and the person that's cast on are kind of fucked for quite some time for just
which one
resurrection.
Was that normal resurrection?
Resurrection, yeah.
Regular resurrection.
Which is interesting and good, and like I guess a good way to not punish but to reinforce that idea of dying sucks. Like even if it's the higher the characters get, it still sucks to die.
Yeah.
And that's something I want to try and reinforce more in my players of you've got a cleric who can just snap his fingers and you'll jump back up, and you've got people who can just healing word you from across the room and you jump back up, but that sucks. No one wants to die, even if you can get back up, which is why abilities like Zealot Barbs get of just relentless endurance and relentless rage of just staying up, and like Captain America, I can do this all day. It crazy cool because they're like, I am scared of death, but I've got stuff in there that stops that happening.
Yeah,
which implies that it's important that you stop that happening.
No, absolutely, and it's this thing that has a question I've seen asked a couple of times recently, which is that what is the point of how do you make death scary in a world where death isn't necessarily scary?
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, players do take it as an insult because it means you miss turns anyway, and even if nothing else, you missing a turn is not fun. So even being dead for a turn is still sucks.
Yes,
and players hate that.
Yeah.
And then narratively, if like you've got the dude laughing about it that's just done it, and just rub as much salt into that wound as possible. This is where we can rely on our innate smugness, Dan.
Oh yeah, oh for sure.
Because then
brimming,
like it doesn't matter. Even if there was no mechanical, even if it doesn't cost half the diamonds, they still don't want you laughing at them. Which is, I appreciate, not necessarily going to fly at every single table, but it's not me, it's a Minotaur who's grinding his hoof in the back of your dead head.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And I do really lean into those when it makes sense, when it's not like a mindless undead abomination that doesn't care, they're just killing them for the sake of killing. When there is kind of a conscious sentient killer, I do try and make a deal of them being vindictive about it and being like, gutted.
Yeah.
My players are likely to be soon coming up against a green dragon in one form or another. I'm trying to pick my words carefully, and all I want to say is I'm very much looking forward to being a smug, conniving, powerful bastard. That's my wish fulfillment.
Absolutely, man. I have to say, running both an Ulitharid and an Aboleth are wonderful for being and now I'm running devils, which is even better for being a horrible smug bastard. You can't imagine the amount of fun you can have being a devil with that stuff. And Amnesu, oh my days, it's great. Good evening. Is there anything we can get you? We'll be seeing you soon anyway. It says lawful good on that sheet. We know otherwise, don't we, sir?
I'm just really looking forward to that encounter. Not only for me to be a bellend, but also because the Green Dragon knows stuff and can do stuff that again should reinforce that fear of like, okay, yeah, we might have just been killing kobolds quite handily for the last 3 or 4 sessions, but this thing that we're gonna see now might see kobolds as nothing more than ants. So, you've just killed a bunch of ants. Well done. You're in pest control. Congratulations. But to him, you're like, you're one step above ants. I don't even know. You're an anteater. Great. Danlo could fight an anteater.
Might actually be more difficult than you think, man. Those things.
Oh man, don't knock me down.
Having struggled against an anteater with a door. I can tell you they are quite strong. That's a story for another time.
Okay, so now I want a giant anteater, and I don't mean giant in the 10-foot combat space giant. I mean like Tarrasque giant anteater to be a big bad guy.
I mean, yeah, statting that would be terrifying. The upper body strength alone, man.
I just got this cool thought of them kind of stepping out of their door if they're in a city. They step out of their hotel door, and there's just this pink fleshy thing like wriggling through the streets. And I'm like, oh, what's this? Just rummaging its tongue throughout the streets. Just people getting stuck to it, just being dragged along.
I'm sorry, I do know exactly what you mean. I can imagine it incredibly well, but it's taking me back to some dodgy anime I watched years ago.
All right. On that note. Is there anything else you had that you wanted to talk about mistakes?
Not a lot of particular. No, I think we covered a lot there, man. Like I suppose I haven't particularly helpful on mechanical mistakes very much. Like when stuff actually does just go wrong and how comfortable. Because I think being comfortable with fudging dice rolls ruling in favour of your players in order to make up for mistakes that they've made,
Mm-hmm.
provided you can do that without compromising the narrative. I think there lies pretty much
Yeah.
a lot of your ways to deal or to change mistakes into opportunities,
Yeah.
is within that ability to have a fluid narrative and to respond to your players, positive and negative, and not be afraid to, when stuff hits the fan, make the shit down shit creep pretty deep.
Yeah, and that's where the expertise comes from, I think. And I'm not saying I am, but I think we know enough to identify that is where the line of, in the start of an adventure, and you don't know because you don't know what you're doing because it's your first time, and little did you know that encounter that wizards have put in front of you is a TPKer, and you don't know any better, and you just do it, and then it kind of sucks, and no one's there. But knowing where to be like, no, hang on, let me just rein that in a little bit, and it still makes sense, and it's still cohesive, but it's better fun for everybody is
and drawing it right back to the beginning. If you think you have completely screwed something up in an unfair way, provided fairness is done and perceived to be done as well, provided people don't feel too victimized, because you've got consistency there. If you have really genuinely screwed everything up and you can't see a way out of it, and there's some massive error that you've made, then bringing right back to the beginning, swearing loads and apologizing a lot. Like, there are some points where you just go, shit, yeah, no, I really messed that up. I didn't mean that to happen. Sorry, that's not what I meant at all. My bad.
Yeah.
Whatever. And then you've just got to trust but provided you're not doing that every 2 weeks, people can be quite forgiving, provided you're willing to be a little bit of give and take there. And provided they think you're listening to them as well, I think.
Yeah, give and take, and to err is human.
Exactly.
That's just life. So
not draconic, though.
to err is humanoid is perhaps a better. Boom, right.
Nice.
To bask in my glory after you saying I couldn't fight an anteater.
To bask in your glory?
To bask in my glory.
Oh.
Could fight an anteater. Anyway, so I think that pretty much brings us to the end on that proclamation of strength.
I'll stat one. I'll stat one, and we'll run a one shot. Danlo versus the anteater. Could turn into a sitcom, Danlo and the anteater.
God, I can't bear to think of the fluff text for the tongue attacks that anteater is gonna get. All right.
Nice.
So we shall put a pin in it there. Thank you very, very, very much for coming on, Jamie, and
thank you for having me.
Thank you everyone listening for listening to this crazy babble of death and anteaters. Is maybe the subtitle of this episode. If anyone has any thoughts or comments, please tweet me at download_DND. Otherwise, good night.
Take care.